Hello, my dear viewers. I'm glad to be with you. I'm Olga Demchuk, a researcher of the inner world of personality. Today, we'll talk about self-esteem. And for some reason, I have a feeling that what I'm going to tell you today may not be very pleasant for you, but let's give it a try. So when we talk about being in pain, we understand when we are in physical pain. For example, we cut our finger with a knife. But pain is not only physical, there is also psychological, psycho-emotional pain when something hurts inside. And there was no physical contact with anything. I am not talking about when our body hurts, when we are sick. I mean specifically this emotional pain. Let's attempt to gain a deeper understanding of exactly what this pain is and what factors actually contribute to how intense it feels. So, for example, when I accidentally slice into my finger with a sharp knife, and then I describe the situation to another person later on, I usually just say, I cut myself. And in this phrase, I cut myself, there is no one to blame. That is, I cut myself sounds like an accident. But as soon as I put it into words when telling about this event as I cut myself with a knife, I appear as the cause. It's as if something inside responds to this phrase. When I say, I cut myself with a knife, something starts to look closely at this eye, the eye that got cut. Or, you cut me with a knife. Sometimes, someone hands you a knife by accident and you grab it and you get cut. Or someone was cutting something and you wanted to grab something and you say, you cut me. So we find someone to blame, we find a cause. And our inner beast, our instinct for self-preservation, starts to look at this object as if with completely different eyes. Just a moment ago it was neutral, but now it becomes a threat. And even when it's me, when I cut myself, I become a threat to myself. So you see, our psyche seems to be divided into an instinct for self-preservation and a human part. Our instinct for self-preservation, in a way, attacks the personality, telling it, this is dangerous. Or it says, pay attention, be alert. That is, when we feel pain without any physical contact at all, I want to offer you this hypothesis. We attack ourselves. I think many people will object and say, how can that be? If someone calls me a bad name, how am I attacking myself? Isn't it that person attacking me? So let's break it down with an example and follow the logic. For instance, someone tells you, you are not competent in this matter. You are not competent in this matter. I would ask those who are taking notes to write down this phrase because every word here is important. There is no need to change anything here. You are not competent in this matter. And my immediate reaction to these specific words, the deep emotional pain I begin to feel, depends on many different factors. For example, if I am a psychologist and someone tells me that I am not competent when it comes to doing electrical wiring, these words will cause me much less pain. Well, undoubtedly, there are people who simply cannot bear hearing about their own incompetence, no matter what it is about. But that is a different case altogether. So, if I am a psychologist and I am not competent in electricity, how it is installed, how it works, then I will feel only a little pain. But if someone tells me that I am incompetent in psychology, the amount of pain I will experience will be much greater. That is to say, if we follow my hypothesis, the fact that I am being attacked, the attack grows stronger, surging in volume and intensity, as if it were issuing a dire warning of the imminent danger ahead. Let's add another factor. For example, I am told that I am incompetent in personal correspondence. Or I am told that I am incompetent on public social media, for example, in a comment thread. Or we are having a meeting with colleagues and someone at this meeting says to my face, you are incompetent. You'll agree that in a private message, the emotional response to this phrase will be less than in the presence of others. And many people take advantage of this because in private correspondence, the pushback may be less, while publicly, a person might be afraid, making it easier to attack. But that is a different topic altogether. Let's return to what really hurts. So I am experiencing pain, and this pain can vary in intensity. That is, I have some kind of internal frame of reference, my own worldview, and if these specific words do not contradict or clash with this deeply held internal frame of reference, then my personal reaction to them is significantly less intense and much more manageable. For example, if in my worldview it is perfectly normal not to be competent in how to conduct electricity, then such words do not affect me. I have no emotional response at all. But if I receive this kind of message about my professional activity, which is tied to my identity, on which my life, my status, and my authority depend, my income, my self-affirmation, then my internal frame of reference starts to spark more intensely. When I talk about a frame of reference or worldview, I am talking about identity. In other words, it is the image with which we associate ourselves. Essentially, when someone says that I am incompetent, it feels almost like an attack both on my internal frame of reference and on me personally. However, as you can see, we will each perceive and interpret this attack, these words, in very different ways. That is to say, the intensity of the attack will vary for each of us. If we compare it to a hit, it depends on how hard the hit was. Was it a light hit or a hard one? And depending on that, my internal alarm system suddenly begins to trigger and go off, much like a loud, persistent car alarm. It starts to echo and sound throughout my mind, either louder or quieter. There's another nuance. For example, someone tells you that you are incompetent. Let's say it happens right at a meeting in front of your colleagues. And you came to this meeting already feeling wound up. Well, let's say there was a conflict at home or something happened on the way. In that case, your emotional reaction will be stronger. That is, there was already accumulated tension. And this tension, on top of those words, it's as if it overflows an already full cup. And then there's an internal explosion, a kind of release. But you might also come to this meeting, for example, sleep deprived because you're unwell. You slept poorly, your nose was congested, you had a fever, but for some reason you still had to come to work. And these words about incompetence will trigger only a slight emotional response in you because you simply don't have the energy to react emotionally. That's why sometimes people unconsciously enjoy the feeling of being tired, or they say that they actually feel smarter when they haven't slept enough, at least up to a certain point. It's precisely because those overwhelming emotions are absent. So, as you can see, I'm encouraging you to rely on logic right now. The words themselves may be exactly the same, but they can trigger a greater or lesser response in us, a surge of emotion. Now let's step aside for a moment so we can return to this point later. For example, you go to bed and suddenly remember that you haven't paid the rent. Here's a question. Did you pay the rent? At that moment, there's an emotional surge, and then you remember, yes, you did pay, and the emotional surge fades away. Or someone confronts you with a complaint. You didn't pay the rent, and you think, did I pay or not? There's a surge, and then, yes, I paid. And then you relax. So you see, we do something with ourselves that reduces this emotional charge. You see, it's self-soothing. So not only do we generate this pain from within, but we can also in some way influence it, we can neutralize it. In other words, essentially, as soon as I acknowledge myself as the source of this pain internally, I do not shift responsibility onto the other person. He said something and I reacted. I reacted? No, he hit me and I reacted. And it is within my power to do something with myself so that this reaction is reduced. Just like paying rent for an apartment. If we do not acknowledge ourselves as the source of this pain, in other words, as I suppose, it is the instinct of self-preservation that activates us, that warns us something is dangerous, then I have to do something about the other person. Not with myself, but with the other person. Well, if the other person is the source, if the other is to blame, if the other is the reason, if the other is responsible, then I have to somehow influence them, justify myself, attack, try to change them, and so on. And here, all these processes happen chaotically because I haven't claimed them, haven't recognized them as my own, I don't control them, and I rush along the reflex arc like a runaway cart, moving along the specific rails of a certain chemical reaction, and I no longer choose my reaction. I can either attempt to suppress it entirely by sheer force of will, effectively suffocating my own voice, or it suddenly breaks through the surface and bursts out, but I simply can't regulate its overwhelming intensity or its specific quality. That is, as soon as we start perceiving this pain as our own, we gain something, like pedals in a car. You're put in a car, no steering wheel, no pedals, and it drives itself. It's like a robot car, or it's a car with pedals where I can press more or less, turn the wheel this way or that. So as soon as I perceive the pain of my wounded pride as something generated from within, I become the person who is actually behind the wheel of this car. Before that, I am just a person whom this car is rushing toward. To put it another way, we have to consider our reaction. We have to consider its intensity, and that is fundamentally determined by our specific frame of reference. Of course, every situation needs to be analyzed individually, but let's talk about what determines the intensity. First and foremost, it depends on our idealistic notions about ourselves and the world, about how things are supposed to be. That is, if everything must be perfect, if people must be perfect, if people must react to me perfectly, then my self-esteem will be hurt all the time. Things will always feel wrong. So when something is not as it should be, it causes me pain. And the more unrealistic a person's perception of the world is, the more pain they experience. If there is more pain, then there is also more anger, either at oneself or at others. It also depends on the nervous system. Some people have a very excitable nervous system by nature. That is, it reacts more intensely than the average person's. Therefore, the amount of perceived attacks and pain they experience will be greater. They need to be twice as smart as average in order to be able to regulate this. But when we talk about wounded self-esteem, there is always this association in the mind that someone is attacking me. It's as if I am a victim and someone is attacking me, hurting me, stabbing me with a knife. And I am this innocent victim who somehow manages to cope with it. But now let's turn the board around. What do you think? Do you wound the world's self-esteem when you think that there is something wrong with the world? For example, you walk down the street and people aren't the way you want, their clothes aren't right, they don't behave the way you expect, the advertisements are silly, the cars are fast and noisy. So you see, in fact, we are constantly attacking the world and always saying that it is not the way it should be, not out loud, but to ourselves. But this goes on all the time within us. This is imposing our own ideas about how the world and other people should be. So we are not such victims after all, we attack as well. But since no one goes around recording our thoughts or writing them down, it seems as if we are not attacking at all. But the world, yes, it attacks us, so to speak. And so, my friends, in order to effectively manage and regulate the intensity of our wounded self-esteem, We need to learn how to identify and catch the impulse. It's like catching sunlight. The impulse is similar to light or to an electric current, meaning the current starts to flow. Our signaling system tells us that this is unsafe. This does not match my idea of how things should be. And if I do not recognize this electric current as my own impulse, I react automatically. I can no longer think about how I should respond to this person or what environment I am in. If I start saying in front of my colleagues, "You are also incompetent," then I will feel ashamed of it later. So you see all these thoughts. When I choose a strategy, I understand why this person is saying what they are saying and how they are saying it. All these thoughts arise at the moment when awareness appears and I take ownership of this impulse, when I don't simply follow it. That's why people prefer to communicate in writing, because in personal contact it's much harder to restrain these impulses. But here, as if in written communication, I have the opportunity to distance myself, to think, and then to say something. In real life, it doesn't always work that way. That's why we can only catch this impulse if we understand that it is ours. And as for how to work with this impulse, how to lessen this pain, how to talk to yourself, we will discuss this in more detail at the webinar Wounded Self-Esteem, which we also plan to release in English. In this video, I hope I have also shed light on some dark corners for you and provided a tool. Share your thoughts on what wounded self-esteem means. Try to put it into words, not too formally, but by looking inside yourself and perhaps sharing an association that comes to you. When my self-esteem hurts, it is like, or when it hurts, I become like this. So try to come up with your own thoughts. And now I'll say goodbye to you. See you next time. Please like the video and leave your comments.